Most people think Myanmar is doomed to stay poor. A country trapped in conflict, isolated from the world, rich in resources but somehow still struggling. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Myanmar is not poor because it lacks wealth. It's poor because it hasn't unlocked it. This is a nation sitting between two economic giants, China and India, a country filled with natural gas, jade, fertile land, and one of the most strategic coastlines in Asia. So why isn't it rich? And more importantly, can it become rich? In this video, we'll break down the one structural weakness keeping Myanmar trapped, the hidden economic advantage almost nobody talks about, and the realistic path that could transform it into one of Asia's fastest growing economies. But be warned, the biggest obstacle to Myanmar's wealth isn't what most people think. And when you understand that, everything changes. Before factories are built, before foreign investors arrive, before GDP rises, one thing must exist first: stability. Right now, Myanmar's biggest economic problem isn't a lack of resources, it's uncertainty. Ongoing internal conflict, fragmented authority, and sudden political shifts make long-term planning almost impossible. And when businesses cannot predict tomorrow, they refuse to invest today. The first step toward wealth is ending prolonged internal conflict through credible nationwide ceasefire agreements. Economic growth cannot take root in active instability. Roads, ports, and factories require security. Investors require predictability. Peace is not just a moral goal, it is an economic prerequisite. But peace alone isn't enough. Myanmar must build credible, independent institutions, a central bank that controls inflation without political pressure, a judiciary that enforces contracts fairly, anti-corruption bodies that actually hold power accountable. Investors do not expect perfection, but they demand rules that are consistent. Look at countries that transformed rapidly, from South Korea to Vietnam. What changed first wasn't just policy, it was institutional discipline, clear regulations, predictable taxation, contract enforcement, stability of governance. Investor confidence works like trust. It builds slowly and collapses instantly. Myanmar would also need gradual reintegration into the global financial system. That means normalizing international relations, easing sanctions through political compromise, and reconnecting to international banking networks. Without access to global capital flows, growth remains constrained. And perhaps most importantly, economic policy must survive political transitions. Investors think in decades, not election cycles. If policies reverse every few years, capital simply waits or leaves. Here's the reality. Capital does not fear poor countries. It fears unpredictable ones. Without predictable rules, money will always choose safer destinations. But if Myanmar can establish stability, institutional credibility, and long-term policy continuity, investment won't need to be forced. It will arrive on its own. Myanmar is not a resource-poor country. It holds vast reserves of natural gas, jade, copper, timber, and rare earth minerals. Resources that many developed nations simply don't have. On paper, this should make Myanmar wealthy, but history shows something uncomfortable. Countries rich in natural resources often grow slower than those without them. Economists call this the resource curse. Easy money from raw extraction reduces pressure to diversify, fuels corruption, and concentrates wealth in the hands of a few. The difference between failure and success lies in how resources are managed. Instead of exporting raw gas or unprocessed minerals, Myanmar could shift toward value-added industries, refining gas domestically, processing minerals before export, developing petrochemicals, and building downstream manufacturing chains. When a country exports finished or semi-finished products instead of raw materials, it captures far more value, creates skilled jobs, and builds industrial capacity. Then comes revenue management. A sovereign wealth fund, similar to the model used by Norway, could channel resource profits into long-term national investment. Instead of disappearing into opaque networks, revenues could be invested in infrastructure, education, and financial reserves for future generations. Transparency would be key: public reporting, independent audits, clear fiscal rules. Environmental protections must also be enforced. Short-term extraction without regulation destroys farmland, forests, and coastal ecosystems. Sustainable management ensures resources generate wealth not just for 5 years, but for 50. And perhaps most critically, profits must not remain concentrated among military-linked entities or political elites. Broad-based distribution through public investment and regional development is essential for inclusive growth. Here's the core truth. Resources don't automatically create prosperity. Institutions determine whether resource wealth becomes national development or national instability. Myanmar already has the assets beneath its soil. The real question is whether it can build these systems above ground to manage them wisely. Some countries have oil, some have technology. Myanmar has something just as powerful: location. It sits between two economic giants, China and India, home to nearly 3 billion people and some of the fastest growing markets in the world. Add its coastline along the Bay of Bengal and Myanmar isn't isolated. It's positioned. If used strategically, Myanmar could become a vital land bridge connecting South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Western China. That means developing deep-sea ports, modern logistics hubs, and rail networks that link inland production centers to global shipping routes. Infrastructure changes everything. When transport costs fall, trade rises. When trade rises, investment follows. Participation in regional trade networks like ASEAN also offers enormous opportunity. ASEAN provides access to a massive integrated market, but to fully benefit, Myanmar must align regulations, reduce bureaucratic friction, and modernize customs systems to make cross-border trade seamless. Border regions, often conflict-prone and informal, could be transformed into regulated economic corridors. Legal trade zones with tax incentives, transparent oversight, and infrastructure support could replace smuggling networks with structured commerce. And then there is manufacturing. As wages rise in parts of East Asia, global companies are relocating factories to lower-cost destinations. Countries like Vietnam benefited massively from this shift. Myanmar, with the right reforms, could position itself as the next competitive manufacturing hub, especially in textiles, light assembly, and agro-processing. But geography alone doesn't create wealth. Strategy does. Myanmar has a choice. It can remain a geopolitical battleground influenced by larger powers competing for leverage, or it can become a bridge economy facilitating trade, connecting markets, and earning from its position rather than suffering because of it. Geography offers the opportunity. Policy determines whether that opportunity becomes prosperity. Natural resources can generate revenue. Geography can create opportunity. But neither creates sustainable wealth without one critical factor: skilled people. The real infrastructure of any developed country is not just highways or ports, it's human capital. For Myanmar to truly become rich, massive investment in education and vocational training would be essential. Not just basic literacy, but job-ready skills: electricians, technicians, coders, machine operators. Skilled labor turns potential into productivity. Technical universities must be strengthened, engineering capacity expanded, partnerships with foreign institutions encouraged. Countries that industrialized successfully didn't wait for talent to appear. They deliberately built it. Look at Vietnam. Decades ago, it was poorer than many African nations. Today, it is a manufacturing powerhouse because it invested heavily in export-oriented production and workforce training. Or consider South Korea. In the 1960s, it was economically devastated. Through aggressive education reform and industrial policy, it transformed into a high-tech economy. Myanmar doesn't need to invent a new model. It can adapt proven ones. Export-oriented manufacturing should become a central pillar. Textiles, electronics assembly, food processing, and light industrial production. These industries absorb large segments of the workforce, create supply chains, and integrate economies into global trade networks. At the same time, small and medium enterprises must be empowered. SMEs are often the backbone of resilient economies. Access to credit, simplified regulations, and entrepreneurship programs programs can create domestic business ecosystems instead of relying solely on foreign investors. Because here's the core reality. Long-term wealth doesn't come from what lies underground. It comes from what people can produce above ground. Commodities fluctuate, productivity compounds. If Myanmar invests in its people systematically, strategically, and consistently, industrialization won't just raise GDP, it will build an economy that can sustain prosperity for generations. At the end of the day, development requires capital. Factories need financing, infrastructure needs funding, entrepreneurs need credit, and global investors need confidence. Right now, Myanmar's financial system faces deep trust deficits. Currency instability, banking fragility, and regulatory unpredictability make long-term investment risky. The first priority must be stabilizing the currency and strengthening the banking system. An independent, disciplined central bank that controls inflation and maintains liquidity is not optional, it's foundational. Banking reform must follow stronger capital requirements, transparent balance sheets, modern risk management. When citizens trust their banks, deposits rise. When banks are stable, lending increases. And when lending increases, economic activity accelerates. Special economic zones can serve as reform laboratories. Clearly defined investor protections, simplified regulations, reliable dispute resolution mechanisms, and tax transparency can attract foreign manufacturers who are seeking predictable environments. If designed properly, SEZs can send a powerful signal. The rules here will be honored. Digitization is another lever. Digital payments, electronic tax systems, and transparent public financial management reduce corruption and increase efficiency. When transactions leave data trails, informal leakage declines. Trust rises. But perhaps the most complex element is international reintegration. Gradual sanction relief achieved through political compromise and institutional reform would reopen access to global financial market, development financing, and multilateral institutions. Isolation limits capital flows, engagement expands them. And then there is Myanmar's diaspora. Millions of citizens living abroad send remittances home. Formalizing these flows through secure banking channels and offering diaspora investment bonds or business incentives could transform remittances from consumption support into development capital. Because here's the reality. Capital does not avoid countries because they are poor. It avoids countries because they are unpredictable. Money flows where contracts are enforced, currencies are stable, and policies are credible. If Myanmar can rebuild financial trust domestically and internationally, global capital will not need persuasion. It will follow opportunity. Now, if you want to know how Myanmar got poor in the first place, then you're going to watch this video showing up on your screen. Thanks for watching, mate, and a bundle of thanks for hitting the subscribe button.